Hey everybody, it's Annette. Since I started this YouTube, I knew I would be discussing what I'm about to discuss, and I've kind of been putting it off, but it is about this time 2 years ago that everything kind of went down, and I'm referring to losing a best friend. I'm blessed to have two best friends, and because they're both named Diane, I had to identify them by their hair color. There was redhead Diane and blonde-haired Diane. Well, redhead Diane and I worked together 4 years at the university. And when she first started there, she had some mobility issues. And over the years, it got worse. But we really bonded and had great conversations, would go out to eat. When we had university events and her mobility got worse, I would hold her plate and she would walk on her walker behind me and point to what she wanted. And we sat together, and literally every time after work, we'd talk on the phone, especially after I left at the university and she was still there. So I left, and for, oh gosh, 7 years maybe after that. So worked together 8 years, and then friends for an additional 7 years, talking almost every day on the way home from work. When I was working at a distribution center at a place I really hated, I could count on that call after work, always after I got off of work, but then there was a dead spot where the phone would always disconnect by the river. And instead of just saying, I used to say like, oh, this call's going to drop. I go, river. And that was her cue. If the call got dropped, that I would call her right back once I got to a clear spot. But anyway, 2 years ago, mid-October, I get a call from her son that she'd been admitted to the hospital, and learned that she'd been having chest pains for 2 weeks and hadn't told any of us. And so she was in the hospital for a long time. I want to say 2 months. And it got to where she wasn't conscious. She was just kind of, machines were doing a lot of the work. And unfortunately, there was not a living will. So her son, who lived with her, thank God, and he was an adult son, so he was a good caregiver and a good son to her. He'd ask me, like, during one of the hardest moments, what would you want? And I said, I wouldn't want that, but I can't tell you to end your mother's life. So he did continue with her a while because he had hope, and her labs were looking positive, actually, for everything going against her. She was a liver transplant patient, not due to alcohol abuse or anything like that. It's just one of those unfortunate incidences where years ago she'd had a liver transplant, and then there were the mobility issues and other health issues that go with being organ recipient, and having it just, balance the medications and the levels on your lab to make sure you were always where you needed to be. And she was one of the driving forces that really made me rethink my knees, because her knees were going bad years ago. And when there was the opportunity to have knee replacement, she did not get it done. And then by the time she was really ready to have it done, then the labs were off. She spent an incredible amount of her time in pain, but she wouldn't complain. Once in a blue moon, she would. I think when she got shingles and was in the hospital, that's the only time I really heard her complain about the level of pain she was going through. But living every day with the pain, and then hearing, about me and all my problems, or this is, this is the worst thing that could have happened to me. What am I going to do? And she would always say, you're strong. You'll get over this. You're a fighter. That's what you do. You're a fighter. That's what you do. More than once she told me that. I don't know why it cut off. I'm going to try this again and see if I can connect the two. I don't know what I'm doing, but anyway. It said maximum recording time reached, and then it's kind of stopped. So maybe it's the devil, because this is a difficult time for me. But when she got sick in October and it was really serious, I was selfish because my birthday's in October, and I thought, I don't want to have the memory of my best friend dying on my birthday. I really didn't want her to die on my birthday, and she did. And it sounds crazy at the time, but it hurt so much, and I knew it was going to hurt if I lost her. It wasn't looking good. It really wasn't. And so I went to see her at the hospital. She had been moved to a facility in Pineville, North Carolina, I believe. And I did go to visit her, and she was awake and couldn't really speak too well. She had a trachea in her throat, and her son had gotten her this board that she could point at the letters to communicate. And so she was trying to do that, and I was trying to communicate. And I remember that they were coming in. She was hurting with her back. You know how you lay there a long time and you get hurting, and her legs were just kind of flat. And anybody who has knee pain, you know that you need a bolster under there. So we called the nurses in there and, asked for assistance with a bolster. And they didn't know what I was talking about. And I said, like when you get a massage. Well, then it clicked. They knew what I was talking about. So they tried to get it under there. And she was overweight, so they had trouble moving her some, but they did get the bolster under her. And then she wanted her feet massaged. She had on these thin socks. And so her son grabbed one foot and I grabbed the other foot. And that's the first and only time I've ever massaged another woman's feet. And then she got to get video calls from another one of her friends. And I got a call, like it was so quiet because I was so used to getting off of work and my phone ringing. I'd be on Bluetooth. I'd press that button. She'd be on there. We'd get to talking. Sometimes she'd start calling before I'd get in my car, and I'm going like, woman, give me time to get in the car. And after she'd gone in the hospital and had that setback, I got a call, and it was her. It was her voice, and she was talking, and it's like she'd been brought back from this perpetual sleeping. And she was telling me, how much I meant to her, and what a good friend I was. And I told her she was the same. And we told one another that we loved one another. And I think God gave me that moment, because without that moment, I don't think I could have carried on past that. Because a few days later, her son called me, and he's in the hospital with her, and he said, I was at work. It was like 1 o'clock-ish or something. And he said, her hands are cold. I said, and inside I'm freaking out. And I go to the door, call the doctor, and tell them to come in there, because I knew the hands getting cold were not a good sign. And so he got off the phone real quick and called me right back, and she's gone. And it was like a sucker punch. After talking to her on the phone and thinking we were going to get a miracle and a turnaround, and then from that to him calling me, telling me that her hands were cold, and then like just so quickly her heart just stopped. It was devastating on so many levels because, again, I'm blessed to have had two. Well, apparently somebody didn't realize that her phone was getting filled up with my YouTube videos, so I've corrected that. What I was saying when the other one ended, and I apologize for the interruption, is that I've been blessed to have two best friends in my life. Losing Redhead Diane was it was hard. That was a huge loss. She was my rock. She was the one who I could go to and really talk to when I had something going on. She would always have the wisest thing to say. She was a sociology professor, and I would say, "Can you help me make sense of this from a sociological standpoint? Because this is not making sense to me." Or if I was feeling unattractive, she'd say, "You're beautiful." I mean, I wasn't fishing for compliments. There were just some days I didn't feel like I looked good. And just having her there, one thing I will say about her that no other person that I know of like this, she saw the good in everybody. She was kind to everybody. She wasn't stupid. She would know if somebody was a troublemaker or not a good person. But as far as like overall evil in the world, like for example, when we had the pandemic, and of course I had my tinfoil hat on saying where I thought it originated from. And she's like, no, Annette, no, it's not from that. She didn't have the capability to see that kind of evil in others. And so many of her students, like, I've never known anybody to be loved like she was loved by her students. Nobody wanted to disappoint her. And you know how college students are, they'll act up. And so one day, I was administrative assistant, and she was like 3 doors down from me, and I had her students coming by, and they kept poking their head in my office, and I'm like thinking, what's going on? And one stuck his head in and said, "Is Dr. so-and-so coming back to class?" I said, "What'd y'all do?" So apparently they had been acting up, and Diane would not say anything. She would get up and walk out. But students knew what was expected of her, so she would go in her office and close the door, and they didn't like that. The guilt they felt, that was bigger than any reprimand anybody could have given to them from her. But navigating life after losing a best friend, it's going to be different for everybody. For me, because of the dynamics in the relationship we had, the quietness made me crazy. Getting in the car and it being so quiet on the way home, I couldn't take it. I couldn't take being in my headspace like that. So I started diving into audiobooks. And I think that first year I lost her, went through 34 audiobooks, just listening to that, escaping. It was my escape. I still listen to audiobooks. I really ramped up what I do in the garden. And I already had, the chickens, already had been growing things, but I have ramped it up more. I think keeping my mind busy and going to festivals and mingling with other people is healthy for me. Working out is, but I tell you, sometimes when I'm in the car and whatever I'm listening to on Bluetooth pauses for a moment in a drop zone or something, I'm I'm still thinking to this day that it's her calling in, and then I remember. So if you've lost a best friend, my heart goes out to you, and I ask that or offer that you find your way to navigate your pain in your journey through this. For me, like I said, it was the audiobooks, the gardening, doing different hobbies and stuff like that. You'll have to find what works for you. And nobody's going to be able to take the place of the person we lost. But there are a lot of nice people out there to meet and to interact with. And I pray that you take it, take that blessing and find friends. The bond between women, when it's a good, healthy friend and friend bond, is so sacred and so hard to come by. And if you have that, call her up and let her know how much you care about her and what she means to you. If you've lost that, my heart goes out to you, and I pray that you find your own path to healing. I can listen, I can respond to comments. I don't know what you may have gone through, and I can't say that I know what you're talking about because I don't. Your experience will be completely different than mine was. But with all my love and all my being, I pray that you find what works for you as you navigate this. Love y'all. Have a good night.